In the series premiere of Snowpiercer, the Earth got really hot thanks to global warming and wars, so scientists just decided, hey, we'll just cool it down, but that didn't quite work, and the Earth ended up freezing up. And there was really only one guy who thought, hey, maybe we should plan for this, and his name was Mr. Wilfred. So he decided to build the Snowpiercer train. 1,001 car lengths that would continuously just circle the globe and never stop. The issue is, pretty much everybody who had a ticket for the Snowpiercer train caused the global freeze, which left the poor and middle class to try to storm the gates and get on. And that's exactly what they did. Right before it left, they stormed the gates, were able to get on, and while security threw a couple of them off, the train left, wasn't going to open back up the doors, and the poor and middle class people were on the train in the very last car. And the show picks up 6 years later where those same people, nicknamed tailies because they're at the tail end of the train, are planning a revolt. And there's many reasons why they're planning this revolt, but mainly it stems from the fact that they're treated like shit. They're kind of used as slave labor from the rich anytime they're needed. And they're sterilizing the women, so it seems like they're just trying to kill off the tailies. And their rations got cut once again. And they're already divvying up their rations between the rats that they own and this guy named Big John, who by far is the strongest and who's someone that they're going to need if they want to revolt. And the revolt is going to be led by a guy named Andre Layton, and he's very hesitant to just okay the revolt because 3 years ago they tried the same thing and they didn't know what cars were up ahead. And because of that, 60 plus tailies ended up getting slaughtered and 13 people had their arms cut off. So Layton just simply wants them to be careful if they're going to do this, but his hesitation has one of the tailies, a guy named Pike, wondering if he's even the right guy for the job. But they're running out of time, and like it or not, Layton is going to have to go along with the plan. And the plan is pretty simple. When security brings in their food rations, they're going to bum rush them, and that's going to tip off the revolt. So they have all their makeshift weapons, and they're just waiting to make their move. And one of the tailies, a guy named Old Ivan, ends up giving a weapon to Andre, saying, you can make use of this better than I can, because Old Ivan's one of the guys who had his arm cut off. And he also tells him that the car is really set up like a social class. The farther you get on the train, the richer it gets. And that's very true. I mean, the problems at the front of the train are like, there's an issue with the sauna. And the problems with the tail of the train are, how are we going to eat? And the only time anybody from the front of the train visits the tail is to give them food, and that's why they're planning on making their move when they get their food. But when the food arrives, a woman named Ruth from hospitality is with them, and that's a pretty weird thing. And she makes an announcement asking Andre Layton to come forward, and nobody knows why. And because of that, Andre gives a signal to stand down and not attack, but he himself is wondering what's going on. And after an invasive physical, they give him a jacket that says sanitation, and they bring him to the third-class dining car. And when he's brought there, it's the first time he's actually seeing light in 6 years because the tail has no windows. And in the dining car, he meets a guy named Roach who is called a brakeman, but really he just runs security on the train. And he's given a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup. And after devouring the sandwich, Roach says, we know in your past life you were a homicide detective. And Layton looks at them and says, aren't you guys cops? But most of them weren't cops. In fact, one of them was a former soccer player. And the reason they want to talk to Andre is because there's been a murder. And they bring him to the body, and it's a guy who's been chopped up and his dick has even been cut off. But even after seeing the body, getting some food, he doesn't want to help them out because he feels like he'd be a traitor. He just wants to go back to the tail. He tells them, you guys figure it out yourself. And the soccer player, brakeman, decides the best course of action is to kick the shit out of him. And when Roach sees that, he gets really pissed off because it's not exactly the way you get a guy on your side. And then Andre gets introduced to Melanie, the head of hospitality. And immediately Andre recognizes her voice because that's the voice that everybody hears on the train every single morning and sometimes at night. Anytime there's an announcement on the train, you hear Melanie's voice. And she's there because Wilfred wants this solved immediately. And she lets him know that doors will open anywhere his investigation leads him. And Roach makes mention that the same thing happened a couple years ago where a guy was chopped up and his dick was cut off. But they have somebody in prison for that. So either they have a copycat or they have the wrong person in jail. So Layton thinks about it and says, I'll do it for rations and third-class immigration for everybody in the tail. And Roach flips his lid saying that the passengers had tickets. The crew, they had jobs. You guys just bum rush the train. You don't have rights. And then Melanie is able to calm Roach down. She makes Roach uncuff Layton and says, you're the only homicide detective on the train. And Wilfred is simply asking you to contribute. But he still hasn't agreed to anything. He is, however, taken to their version of a prison, where criminals are put to sleep, put away in a drawer, and looked at by a doctor. And the woman who was accused of the murder is a woman named Nikki Jeanette. And they want to wake her up, but the problem with that is she's been asleep for 2 years. And by waking her up, that would be the longest anyone's ever been asleep and then woken up. But since she was the only witness to the murder, they don't really have a choice. Roach then takes Layton through third class with a bunch of young people just screwing each other because he wants him to talk to some of the current suspects. And the first suspect that he sees is a woman that he used to date back in the old days, a woman named Zara. And she was currently dating the victim. And he's pissed off at her for letting them know that he used to be a homicide detective. But she says, it's just like the tale. There's no justice here. They could have pinned this on any of us. And the two have a very contentious relationship because he looks at her like a sellout and she looks at him like an idiot who thought he could use his cop connections to get them on Snowpiercer. And when that didn't work, they had to bum rush the train. And she didn't want to live in the tale and she sold out. And when she sold out, she fell in love with this guy, but he just got murdered. So after a quick chat with Zara, Roach takes him through a couple other cars that have trees growing and a bunch of fruit. And he's just amazed that they have 130 cars growing all this fruit and they can't share any of it with the tale. And in that car, he sees Melanie once again and says, you pulled out all the stops. I mean, you got my ex to talk to me, you got me some food, and you just thought I would do anything, didn't you? But Melanie just simply asked for an update. And he says, well, Zara didn't kill him, I'll tell you that. And I know that there's more to this because why would you be so desperate for my help? Pretty simple to me. You're worried that a murder will disrupt Mr. Wilfred's order. So if you want to keep eating your strawberries up here, you know my demands. Third-class citizenship, rations, and the reproductive rights back. And that one he just added. And in a very complicated way, she tells him that he actually needs them more than Mr. Wilfred needs him. After she leaves talking to Leighton, she goes to talk to somebody named Jinju, who is making her some sushi. And she goes on to explain how they have to wake up Nikki. She also asks Jinju if she can help out the doctor with the process. And Jinju asks if Leighton has even agreed to help them, which he hasn't yet, but Melanie reassures her that he will. And once they find the murderer, Jinju can go back to her work. Now, things haven't gone great in the tale since Leighton got taken, and Pike has tried to take that leadership role, thinking that the reason that Leighton told them not to attack was because he knew that they were coming for him, even though that's not true at all. And a woman named Josie tells him as much. And Pike wants to attack, and the straw that breaks the camel's back is when old Ivan kills himself. And they kind of use old Ivan's death as a rallying cry. And the brakemen have to remove a dead body. So they open the doors and they go to remove old Ivan's, and that's when the group attacks. And when they revolt, word gets to Leighton that they are revolting, and he says, let me handle this, they'll listen to me. So they send Leighton in, but the group is very hostile. Pike especially thinks he's a traitor. Pike says, it's only going to end one way, and Leighton says, yeah, you're right. They're going to storm in here and butcher us. Leighton gets Pike to stand down by saying, I think I found a way to get us out of this alive. He then walks up to Till, the brakeman hostage that they had, and punches her in the face. And Pike and the others are about to once again turn on him, but he says, no, you don't get it. You surrender yourself. It's not that bad. They simply put you to sleep. Get put to sleep. Go in the drawers. He goes on to explain that he's been up 130 cars and seen things that they can only imagine. And because of the murder investigation, he can piece together security schedules and details about the cars. And at this point, Pike breaks down saying, we only made it one car, man. I'm done. But Leighton assures him that they need him up train waiting in the drawers for the day that they take the engine. But when they go to turn themselves in, Ruth says, they're not going in the drawers. Mr. Wilfred wants swift justice. So Leighton says, I'll solve your murder if you have mercy on the tale. And Melanie says, well, he will want justice in the sense of taking one arm, but nobody else is going to die today. And after settling down that mess, Melanie heads back to her room, changes out of some clothes, and then heads to the very front of the train. And her and the driver, Ben, exchange a little chit-chat about the bumpy terrain they're going to be going through the next day. But as he leaves, he says, you have the train, Mr. Wilfred, because this whole time, Melanie is actually Mr. Wilfred. Thank you for watching this recap. If you do not see the next one up in the corner right there on the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up shortly. Please consider following the channel. That'd be cool. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't, there's a thumbs down button for a reason.